Well, good day and welcome to episode 15, a special edition of not the driving force, but the flying force, presented by the Louisiana Transportation Research Center. My name is Todd Blunt. I'm joined today by my friend, colleague, and co-host, Garrett Wheat.
Good afternoon.
We're thrilled that you've chosen to join us here as we highlight the people and projects putting change in the air in Louisiana transportation. For the past 39 years, LTRC has merged the resources of state government and Louisiana universities to identify, develop, and implement new technology to enhance our state's transportation system and beyond. We're continuing today in our three-part series with several members of DOTD's Multimodal Commerce Group. These talented and hardworking folks oversee the operations of Louisiana's non-road transportation infrastructure, including freight and rail, ports and waterways, and as we'll focus on today, aviation. Many of our listeners may not realize that DOTD oversees more than just roads and bridges, but also airports, helipads, and more. To learn more about what that looks like practically and how it impacts the state on a day-to-day basis, we're thrilled to welcome Josh Duplantis and Heather Henson to the podcast today. Josh is DOTD's Assistant Director of Aviation, while Heather works as Aviation Operations Supervisor. This pair is a lot of fun. We can't wait to jump into our conversation with them on the other side of this break. Welcome back to a special edition of The Flying Force. As I mentioned before the break, we're focused on aviation today, and we're thrilled to have both DOTD Assistant Director of Aviation, Josh Duplantis, and Aviation Operations Supervisor and distinguished LTRC alumnus, Heather Henson, with us as our guest. Welcome, y'all. Well, we always like to start by getting to know our guests' backgrounds a bit. So that being the case, what has been your education and career path, and how did you come to be in your current roles?
I've been with the department for 22 years. A majority of that 22 years was in consultant contract services, where I worked my way up through contracts and agreements, and I became the advertisement specialist for the department. And that really inspired me to go back to school and get my bachelor's in business management. And from there, I landed a job at LTRC, and I was there for 5 years. And there I went back and got my master's at LSU in Leadership and Human Resource Development. And from there, I went to Aviation as an operations supervisor. And now I'm just in my position learning aviation. I've been there a year. And I'm doing contracts for the section and leading and doing what I've always wanted to do.
Full circle back to where you started.
Yes.
In the sense of contract.
Exactly.
Oh, well, first of all, let me say thank you for letting us hijack your podcast, The Driving Force, and calling it The Flying Force.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, we're not always roads and bridges. We have other modes of transportation, and so we're shining a light on aviation. And I appreciate y'all agreeing to do that.
Absolutely.
So just a little bit about myself. Josh Duplantis. I studied aviation at Louisiana Tech University, where after I got my bachelor's in aviation management with a minor in business administration, I became the intern for the aviation section within DOTD about 12 years ago. And really, I've been with the department in the aviation section since then. I started in a kind of entry-level position as an airport inspector where I was doing safety audits at airports. And from there, I kind of climbed the ladder a bit, and now I'm the Assistant Director of Aviation with focusing on emerging aviation and advanced technology.
Very cool.
Excited to hear about that. So, Josh, could you give us an overview of DOTD's work with aviation? Maybe like how many airports we have, helipads, anything else we may not know about? And is DOTD responsible for operating and overseeing these? And just, I guess, anything else included in your responsibilities?
Well, anything else included in my responsibilities, we may be here for a while, but yeah, I'll give you a couple details about Louisiana's airport and aviation system. There's over 600 facilities in Louisiana that are airports, heliports, hospital helipads, agriculture strips, so on and so forth. If it's involved in aviation where an aircraft is operating, it kind of falls under our purview. And we have different responsibilities depending on if it's a public use facility or a private use facility. And all that means is if it's a big airport like New Orleans International, that's a public use facility where we have public funding and grants involved in that. And we have 7 commercial service airports like New Orleans International Airport where you can get on a passenger jet and take a flight somewhere. Then we have 68 total public use airports where we offer funding, grants, technical assistance, statewide planning. There's just a whole realm of services that we provide to the public use airports. The private use airports are more of we're gonna do a safety assessment and register the facility with compliance with statute, essentially. And so it does not then qualify for public funds. So we focus mostly providing funding and technical assistance to our state's public use airports, and they're all over the state. Kind of evenly distributed, more focused on South Louisiana from a geographical standpoint. We have a new airport that's under development now for the first time in a long time in Livingston Parish. So that's like a greenfield project. So we all get to kind of put our kind of fingerprints and analysis on that. So it's exciting to see aviation growing and developing in the state. And so funding and technical assistance, we have a grant program that's around $30 million a year, a little less. And that's based on aviation fuel tax revenue. So avgas, jet fuel that anyone purchases and puts into an aircraft, the state sales tax associated with that comes back to the department for us to turn around and issue grants back out to those airports so we can do infrastructure projects. And that's what we focus on mostly is those infrastructure projects through our grant program. And so 65% of that revenue goes to the air carrier airports like New Orleans International or Lafayette Regional or Monroe or Alexandria, Shreveport. The whole purpose of that grant program is to get that money out to the airports. We have kind of statewide planning work that we do where Heather does a lot of the kind of direct contract work where we do statewide planning, statewide transportation system plan. There's an aviation system plan component of the transportation system plan, economic impact studies, just anything that may come up from a statewide perspective where we identify and strategize that there's a need out there. We want to be able to address that, and maybe later on we'll discuss some of the work that we're doing in advanced technologies and advancing the economy and things of that nature. And we're also safety focused, and so at those public airports that I mentioned, we do a safety audit every year. Not the larger ones like New Orleans International. The federal government takes care of those, but the smaller general aviation airports like Louisiana Regional Airport in Gonzales, Louisiana, or False River Regional Airport in New Roads, Louisiana, the state, our office is responsible for inspecting those and making safety recommendations based on what's currently going on out there, whether that be pavement, lighting, markings, so on and so forth.
Well, Josh, you just mentioned safety. So I wanted to ask, what are some of the key contributing factors to aviation safety across the state? What are some of the things you're looking for when you go out to perform these audits, inspections, et cetera?
Yeah, let me first start by saying that safety is paramount. Safety is the number one concern that all stakeholders in the industry have. It's probably not specific or unique, I should say, to aviation, but rather, all modes of transportation. Safety is just up there. So all stakeholders in aviation have a focus on safety, whether that be the airline operators, the flight crew themselves, pilots, flight attendants, airport operators. Everyone who's involved in aviation has a safety mindset, and that is reflected through our grant program as well. When we're prioritizing these applications for funding, we're looking for, okay, what are your safety problems, and let's address those first, and that's reflected in our priority score when those projects are evaluated for funding. We always use this example. If you've got a giant hole in your runway, it's never the case, but that is going to be the highest priority.
Right.
For funding from our standpoint, as well as the FAA standpoint. And we integrate very closely with the FAA on working through those priorities. So from doing it from the infrastructure grant side and from the inspection side as well, we're looking to do that entire safety audit and coming up with those ideas of how we can improve safety. It's our mission. It's to deliver a safe and modern system of airports that's efficient for the flying public to use. So we want to be able to have the safest possible picture when Louisiana citizens and people that are touring or coming into Louisiana have the safest airport system possible, because it's all about safety. We have technologies that are in place, from pavement technology to lighting aids to radio-based, ground-based navigational aids. So the pilots and the airplanes can basically just glide down without even having to see the runway environment. It's
That's
just
cool.
Yeah, it's just based on technology, and the air crew has to have a certain amount of trust there.
Sure.
But the ground side, the management side of it, has to get those navigational aids in place and make sure that they are in standard and in specification. And so that's where we come in. We provide some technical assistance. I nerd out a little bit when it comes to navigational aids, visual aids, and instrument aids alike. But it's I mean, to kind of bookend that conversation, it's all about safety. We're safety focused. As much safety as we possibly can, we're all about it.
A second ago, you also mentioned the economy and kind of how y'all play into that. So can you share what role does aviation play in Louisiana's economy, kind of like what some of the day-to-day work looks like?
We recently did an aviation and aerospace economic impact study, which showed $21 billion in economic output. That makes this the largest economic engine in the state of Louisiana. Just to give you a picture, commercial and general aviation airports make up 10 billion of that. And when we compared it to the 2022 study, it was 6 billion. So we went from 6 billion to 10 billion
In 3 years.
in 3 years.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is. And that just gives you the overall picture. Now, that is considering aviation and aerospace in that. Putting the commercial and general aviation airports that make up the 10 billion of that 21 billion.
And what I would also add to that, if I could,
Absolutely.
is that our office within DOTD is a little different, or more unique, I should say, in that commerce is in our office name. We're the Office of Multimodal Commerce. So yes, we're focused on the infrastructure improvement, getting our grants out and getting improvements made out at the airports. We are also interested in economic benefit to the state of Louisiana. So when we are aware of a project that an airport might have, it'll create more jobs, it'll have this much impact for this local unit of government. We're all about developing that and leaning into that and working with those airport sponsors as, what do you need? How can we help you? Because after all, it can't just be about maintaining a certain level and never improving, correct? Well, so what are we doing? We don't want to spin our wheels. We want to help develop Louisiana's economy, attract businesses, create jobs, and help drive our community forward, or should I say, fly our community forward.
And also, just piggybacking onto what Josh said, aviation and aerospace support 142,000 jobs, totaling $7.5 billion in payroll. And the average salary in the industry is $78,000.
Wow.
So that makes it one of the highest salaries in the state. So
Aviation is awesome.
yes, absolutely.
Well, Josh, I'm gonna let you nerd out a little bit. You said you like to do that, so tell us a little bit about the work your group's doing with advanced aviation, drone management, unmanned aircraft. Wherever you want to go with this, what are some of the emerging technologies that you're working with?
Man, Todd, that's a brave question. So you guys prepared to sit here for another 30 minutes while I answer something about drones? In all seriousness, drones have come onto the scene, I don't know, long time ago through the military. It's just recently getting into the civilian sector, into governments, so on and so forth. So about 2017 or so, the aviation section got into evaluating UAS, unmanned aircraft systems. Apologies for the acronyms. There's so many acronyms in aviation. In 2017, we started with UAS, evaluating it, seeing how DOTD could use it from an agency standpoint. Of course, we wanted to do some work with airports, and we were evaluating airspace analysis. We were looking at trees in the vicinity of airports if there were obstructions. Airplanes, you may think, need a safe path to get into an airport, and it's a shallower path than you might think it is. So trees become a very important issue, and that was one of the problems that we analyzed with the drones. To say, let's ortho map, fly the drone over, take some pictures, calculate the obstacle heights, and see what we can do from a project standpoint on the other side. The cost proposal, the efficiencies gained, just speaks for themselves, because traditional survey method that we were used to using with traditional aircraft, they'd come in and they'd do it. That's a lot more costly than a $500 drone or a $1,000 drone or something like that. And so we worked with that, and then we also communicated with other sections within DOTD that were saying, oh, they got a drone, what can we use it for? So bridge inspection workflows, dam safety, they're looking at all the earthen embankments. It's very interesting. I didn't know Louisiana had so many dams in the state, so that was interesting. So I got to learn a lot about other sections' workflows and processes and terminology, like fracture critical members on bridges. Like, I don't even know what that is, but can you explain it to me? So it was pretty cool in that regard, and just being able to kind of collaborate with other sections within the department was pretty cool. I'll give you an example. Do you guys remember when the crane boom hit the Sunshine Bridge? Mm-hmm. So we did a project that was pretty cool where before they wanted to clear the bridge, they wanted to get the drone to fly and look at the damage. And so they had some steel that was kind of like peeled back on the I'm going to say fascia or facade. It was kind of on where the crane boom impacted the bridge. And so me and an inspector, we got on a crew boat. We went onto the Mississippi River Bridge, we went onto the river on the boat, and we launched the drone from the boat. So they tied the boat up to the bridge, and the bridge was right above us. So if it had the possibility of falling into the river, we would have been target numero uno. But looking back, that may be a little bit of a lesson learned there. But we were able to launch the drone, fly it right up to the bridge, look at the damage, take a bunch of high resolution photos, and then we got it. We got the drone back down. We went back on land, on shore at the harbor. The engineers were all looking at the computer screen and were like, yeah, that's damaged, but it's not super critical. So they ended up just shutting down that one lane instead of shutting down the whole bridge, or shutting down those two lanes on that side of the bridge that was closest to the impact. And so it's doing stuff like that that's really cool, and you can see the high value and how it translates into efficiency, safety, learning, case analysis, and so on and so forth. And those are just a couple examples. I mean, the industry in UAS is just every day there's something new or something cool. The other side of the industry, the counter UAS side, is becoming more and more relevant now. Since these drones are so easy to get into, and what's going on across the pond in Ukraine and with warfare, the counter UAS industry is really, really coming up, and that's getting into how do we detect UAS? What is the rules of engagement for mitigating UAS? Because drones or unmanned aircraft are technically aircraft, the interference with that flight is relegated to certain federal level agencies who can interfere with traditional flight. So, like, as an example, if somebody was flying from overseas in the United States and they weren't squawking, or they didn't have their proper transponder code assigned, then you may have a fighter jet escort appear right off your wing. when you kind of try and translate that to UAS and drones, it doesn't really translate all that well.
There's nobody there to really respond to.
Yeah, there's nobody there. So it's really a big problem is whose responsibility is it to actually go out and identify what these drones are if they're in the vicinity of a piece of critical infrastructure, i.e. an airport or a chemical plant or a power plant. I mean, the list goes on. Who's responsible for that, and what kind of solutions can we conceive of to be able to at least filter out, is that a friend or foe, or is that a nefarious thing, or whatnot? So you're talking about,
or just somebody that lost control of a personal one.
Yeah, so the careless and clueless is what we call that, and that's usually solved by education, right? It's the nefarious ones that really provide the problem statement. Is how do you tackle that problem? Because it only takes one. It only takes one example or one time where something just goes wrong and the UAS is used and it penetrates a prison or an airport or a power plant or anything really, and it causes some damage to life or property. That's when it's going to set the industry back. So we're really focused on helping the industry and policy and rulemaking with regard to counter UAS technology and what is the strategy?
Is that why a lot of hobbyist drones are limited to the height
Yes.
they can go?
Yeah, so in the FAR, Federal Aviation Regulation, Part 107, is where you get your authority to operate drones for a commercial drone operator. And most operators have that pilot certificate. It's a pilot certificate. The FAA issues you a certificate with a small UAS rating, and then you have all these operating requirements that you can do. So, as you said, it's 400 foot is in that statute. However, if you're operating in certain environments like controlled airspace, like Baton Rouge Metropolitan Airport, for example, has controlled airspace where you have to have previous authorization prior to flying.
Makes sense.
So in the case of New Orleans, they have an airspace environment called Class Bravo, which is the busiest airspace that exists in the national airspace system. And so we actually did a pretty cool project where we got approval to fly in New Orleans' airspace, and we climbed up on top of the new terminal, and we put the drone up. We called up the air traffic control tower. We got our authorization prior to showing up, and we called them up and say, "Hey, we're ready to fly." They're like, "Yeah, just fly with how you're authorized." So we had to put in a certain radius and altitude, and the point is as long as you're communicative and you're upfront and you're honest about what you're trying to do and you're talking to the correct parties that are involved, you're good to go. But yeah, you're absolutely right. You can't fly above 400 feet usually. You can't go faster than 100 miles an hour, which is a big bummer sometimes. But I guess you can see my enthusiasm about UAS. Yes, it's awesome. There's so many capabilities. There's so many safety enhancements that UAS provide, but on the other side, we have to be very responsible, and we all have that responsibility. If anyone has a drone, and if you are listening to this, please, please, please follow the rules.
Well, you kind of talked about the future. So where do you see the future of aviation in Louisiana going? What are y'all doing now to position yourself to thrive as we move Louisiana forward?
So a lot of the things I just mentioned, it's a great question. A lot of the things we just talked about kind of goes into the same vein. But what I would say is we need to focus on now in this question is the concept of advanced air mobility. Advanced air mobility is, I usually describe it as like we're the Jetsons now. It's the concept of electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. You may have seen some of them. Yeah, you may have seen some of them like on YouTube or some of these news outlets. May have some of the stuff that's going on in China and other countries that they're already flying and they're out there. And so it's like it's autonomous and or piloted aircraft that'll be for passenger transportation and cargo transportation. It's going to be either or. It's going to be cargo or passenger transportation, but it's going to be so cool. I just came back from Exponential, which is AUVSI's annual conference, I'm going to get this wrong, the Association of Uncrewed Vehicle Systems International. And so they had so many just technology providers, counter UAS providers, Whisk, which is the yellow autonomous aircraft that flies 4 people. I got to sit in it and look at all their screens and stuff like that. Man, it was so cool. I think it's going to be a personal choice whether you trust the aircraft to fly you where you want to go, but it's going to be amazing. And so what DOTD is specifically doing is conceiving of our advanced air mobility strategy from zero, because this is so new. Nobody really knows what's going on with advanced air mobility from an operational perspective. There are various test sites across the United States that get into testing drones and testing equipment and components and technologies, propellers, avionics, so on and so forth. But we don't yet really have a operation like Waymo does, autonomous cars and things of that nature. Advanced air mobility is going to identify that. And where we see kind of the use cases for Louisiana is perhaps supporting oil and gas down in the Gulf of America for crew transportation, getting critical tools or other cargo out there to the oil and gas operators, to the platforms. I think there's a really good use case for that. Medevac, having these electric rotorcraft be able to come straight up and straight down at an accident site or something like that, or a site that's hard to get into, where helicopters, they kind of have to glide in. They're not necessarily supposed to go straight up and down. It's a lot more stress on the airframe and the power plant for that helicopter to go straight up and down. And the infrastructure impact for this lower altitude electric aviation industry it's almost unknowable right now. And that's why we're trying to get this strategic plan in place so we can focus on, okay, what does our power grid look like to be able to charge battery electric flying vehicles across the state, and how does that scale? And it's a huge problem to solve and address. And so we're gonna kind of baby step our way through the strategic plan and get all that stuff on paper so we can have a great strategy and a well thought out strategy for moving that whole thing forward. But yeah, it's going to be like the Jetsons. You're going to get in an electric aircraft. You're going to take your Uber, and it's going to fly you where you want to go, point A to point B. It's going to be awesome, and we can't wait for it.
Sign me up.
Yeah, anything to keep me off of I-12.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I take that.
Well, thank you so much, Josh and Heather, for being here with us today, for the great work you're doing to serve Louisiana citizens through our aviation system. Before we go, we have just one more bit of business. We want to have a little bit of fun with you with a few final lightning round questions that Garrett's prepared. Don't think too hard about these, just to help our folks get to know you a little bit better. Garrett?
Fire away.
So, Josh, you're up first. Appropriately enough for your role, you also have a pilot's license, we're told.
Yes.
So could you share a little bit, what's the most challenging thing about acquiring that?
The most challenging thing, I would say, and lots of pilots would probably agree with me, is paying for the thing. Because it is tough on your bank account to be able to get that stuff. Gas is expensive, aircraft rental is expensive. I had the fortunate circumstance where my dad and I owned an airplane, and it was a little bit easier for me to get into it. But I mean, avgas is expensive. Instructors are expensive. You're looking at $50 an hour for an instructor, $200 an hour.
50 hours minimum.
Yeah, so about 50. 40 is where most people get their certificate, and that's the baseline requirement.
Yeah, that's a lot.
But it's a lot, and some airplanes burn a lot of gas, depending on the airframe. So yeah, I would probably say the most difficult part is the cash flowing the thing. The flying and the knowledge that just comes. It comes. It's very easy, especially if you're in like a Louisiana Tech Part 141 program where they have a huge curriculum designed and devoted to training and certifying our airline pilots of the future. You get it as you go. It's not dumped on you all at once. It's a learning process. And then the FAA is responsible for examining you to be able to sign off on your certificate. So your flight instructor does a final flight with you, and you go through all the standards, all the maneuvers. You do slow flight, you stall the airplane, you do your power off 180 where you pull the power back and you simulate an engine failure and you land the airplane safely. These are all maneuvers that are required to pass and get your pilot certificate. So the FAA is the last stop, and if you fail your check ride, you do not get your certificate, and you cannot fly that airplane, you can't fly passengers, and you can't enjoy your airplane.
We also understand you're an avid outdoorsman.
Yeah.
So could you share maybe some of your favorite places to fish or hunt?
So let's go fishing first. Terrebonne Bay. I grew up in Houma, so going spec fishing is what we did as kids. I basically grew up on a boat. Before me and my brother were able to drive a car, we were putting around in a 4 horsepower, 15-foot War Eagle green aluminum flat bottom aluminum boat, and then we finally upgraded it to a 25 Johnson or Mercury. Mercury. But yeah, Terrebonne Bay, spec fishing, gonna do some inshore red fishing here and there.
Yeah.
On the hunting side, we have a lease in the Alexandria area where we do some deer hunting and feral hogs apparently now, because feral hogs are a big problem. But yeah, that's where we do those things.
Well, no, same question for Heather, I guess. Heather loves to hunt.
I do. I love to hunt. I'm an avid hunter. I do. I like to hunt. We have land property in Alabama, so we go up there and we hunt. We're actually getting our plots ready, doing summer plots. But that's something I enjoy. It's peaceful. It's quiet. So
anytime you can burn diesel on a tractor to get the food plots ready, man, it's a good time.
That's exactly right.
It's a good time.
So also, Heather, as a Italian / self-proclaimed Sicilian,
Absolutely.
Can you share the secret to a good red sauce?
The secret to a good red sauce, well, Italians don't tell our secrets. But what we can tell you is it cooks all day.
Man, you gotta cook that all day long.
You have to cook it all day in the Cajun voice. But yes, that's the secret to the red sauce. You cook it all day long.
All right. And then you do have a bonus kind of question. So Todd mentioned earlier you're an LTRC alumnus.
Yes.
And I think we're accurate in our assumption, you enjoyed your time at LTRC.
It was 5 wonderful, amazing, outstanding years.
Could you share something that you wish people outside of LTRC knew about us?
I actually thought of this on the way over here.
Did you?
And teamwork is the biggest thing that LTRC promotes. And being with the department for 22 years and coming to LTRC made me realize just how much teamwork is important in every single area of this department. Teamwork it's just wonderful, and that's what I really learned here. Not that I didn't know what teamwork was, but this is definitely a place that is teamwork.
Appreciate that.
So I have LTRC to thank for the awesome teamwork that we do together in the aviation section.
You absolutely do. Josh and I,
Okay.
yes, you do.
Thank you, LTRC.
Yes.
Well, thank you all for sharing your time and insights today. It was a privilege to have you here with us, telling us more about what you do and why it matters. We'll take a quick break before we close out today's show. Well, that's a wrap on episode 15 of The Flying Force, presented by the Louisiana Transportation Research Center. You can learn more about what's happening at LTRC on a daily basis by visiting us online at ltrc.lsu.edu or on social media through Facebook, X, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We encourage you to like, follow, and subscribe to our channels on each of these platforms. Additionally, if you'd like to learn more about what's happening in DOTD's aviation group, you can stay up to date by visiting their website at dotd.la.gov/aviation. And we'll put both those in the show notes as well. We hope you'll join us again for our next episode as we wrap up our 3-part series with DOTD's Multimodal Commerce Group. We'll move from the air back into the water to learn about waterways with particular focus on dredging and navigation with Chris Collins. Until then, we are your hosts, Garrett Wheat and Todd Blunt, and we thank you so much again for joining us today. Fly safely out there.